going to ask, I see that both Senator Perkins and Assemblymember Aubury are here.
Very much for the thank you very much. I want to do more than say a few words, if you don't mind, but I won't be saying a lot of few words, but because I know that it's not that interesting, but this is a very, very important workshop for us, a very, very important policy for us. And I'm honored that we are able to join you, because I know that the work that you've been doing to try to move this forward has been heroic. So let me do the easy thing first, which is please everybody stand up. Lenny Dunstan's in the house, father of my career. Give them a round of applause for the extraordinary work that they're doing. You know, this is not one of those sexy movements that get a lot of attention. You know, it's one of those movements on the underground side that has to be brought above ground, so that people can really get an opportunity to appreciate the kind of cruelty and inhumanity that's involved in a democratic society, and especially from the context of the victims being mostly people from the Harlems of our country. You know, and so the injustice is one of the most significant struggles that we have to overcome, because it involves the government and subjecting people to what they call solitary confinement, a most dehumanizing experience that you can imagine. And, you know, they have not yet measured how damaged the mind and the spirit happens because of this thing called solitary confinement. And it has not gotten that kind of attention because, you know, it's hidden, you know? And in some respects, they remind me a little bit of the Central Park Five. But in the meantime, I want to just do real quick, I just wanted to make sure that y'all gave them a standing ovation on the camera. So good morning, and thank you, everyone, for participating in this very important Caucus Weekend workshop on solitary confinement. You know, this brother here, this the tall one, Jeff Aubury. You know, you met him before. Make sure you get your autograph. Okay? We have a human rights crisis here in New York State. And over 4,000 individuals, many of the most vulnerable and defenseless among us, are subject to state-sanctioned torture. Everybody repeat after me. State-sanctioned torture. So when anybody asks you what's solitary confinement about, it's about state-sanctioned torture. Okay? No crime should be subject to any torture, especially perpetrated by the state, by the government that you pay taxes for. Nobody. Okay? You may be deserving as a criminal of something, but no human being deserves to be tortured. So today we continue the fight that Martin Sostre, a political prisoner and revolutionary born and raised in Harlem, commenced over 45 years ago when he first legally and successfully challenged the practice of solitary confinement as cruel and inhuman punishment. In 2011, the United States Special Rapporteur agreed with this assessment, calling solitary confinement torture. The United Nations has declared solitary confinement is torture. Plain and simple. We know that isolated confinement is an inhumane, dehumanizing, and counterproductive practice from which nothing positive can follow. Nothing positive can follow from solitary confinement. It's a waste, therefore, of your tax dollars. Understand? You're being taxed for something that has no value to you, or especially to the individuals that are subject to that form of treatment. Can you imagine that? You got that kind of money to waste? Anybody, how many people could use that money for education? Of their child, of your child, of your grandchild, of your neighbor's child. How many people could use that money that we use for solitary confinement for affordable housing? Anybody got any other ways you want to use that money? Anybody? How many people here might want to use that money for the lotto? Maybe your best scotch. Who knows? But definitely you don't want to use it for this. So we know that isolated confinement is inhumane, dehumanizing, counterproductive practice from which nothing positive can follow. We have started to hear stories today that confirm this distressing fact. The encouraging news is that legislators, advocates, and the public are finally coming together and speaking in one voice, saying, now is the time to forever halt solitary confinement in New York State. I am proud to sponsor the Halt Solitary Confinement Act in the Senate Bill 2659, Assembly Bill 4401, with my partner, Jeff Aubury, carrying forth our efforts in the Assembly. We believe that it represents the most comprehensive reform of our system, which is, of course, the most necessary and timely type of reform. This legislation will do 5 essential things: stop isolating and start rehabilitating, move from an isolation model to a supportive treatment model, replacing shoes with residential, rehabilitation units, providing for therapeutic interventions and 6 hours of cell programming daily. Targeting treatment, drastically restrict placement in these units to a very small population of individuals who need intense treatment that can help them heal and grow. Restricting placement, curtail and limit the use of long-term placements to no longer than 15 consecutive days and no more than 20 days in any 60-day period. Protecting special populations, enact a complete bar on any type of isolation for vulnerable populations, including youth, seniors, anyone with a physical, mental, or medical disability, anyone who is pregnant or a new mother, and anyone who is or is perceived to be LGBTI. Corrections, culture change. Train officers to work with individuals and to provide supportive services to help them grow, provide due process protections for anyone placed in isolation, and ensure greater transparency and accountability at our correctional facilities. I want to make sure that everyone picks up a copy of our petition to the governor regarding halt solitary confinement. Please fill it out and let him know that now is the time to pass our legislation. New York must be a human and civil rights leader on this issue. State-authorized torture is offensive and detrimental to us all. Very much.
First of all, I want to thank Senator Perkins for his energy and effort and courageous action of taking this bill on. It is not popular. It is not liked by folks who represent the North Country, and it's not liked by criminal justice folks all around the state. It's not liked by the Department of Corrections and Community Renewal, but guess what? It's liked by us. I want you to remember, too, that the governor of this state could end that practice today by regulation. He doesn't need this law. If he understood this issue, if he spent some time in a shoe, he could turn around in the morning and write a little note and say, you won't do that anymore. All right? But the fact is that we have been faced with circumstances in this state where people want to ignore what goes on behind the walls. And you folks, these individuals, these men and women, are not going to let that happen, and we won't let that happen. And so as long as there needs to be a voice for justice in this state, we commit to being that voice. Do you commit to being that voice? Yes. All right. Do you commit to being that voice? Yes. That's all. All right. We may be small, but we're powerful. Amen. So I want to remind you that a year ago, just so you'll understand the reality of the world we fight in, a year ago, the governor came to the church service in front of man and God and said we were going to restore college programs to the facilities, state facilities in the state of New York. And the howl that came out of the North about all of the violations of other people's rights that by allowing men and women who are incarcerated to go to college, blew him out of the window. So we don't want that to happen anymore. So we need a governor to have courage. If he believes what he says, then you have to have the courage of your conviction and do it, no matter who opposes you. So that's what this is about. It's about having moral courage to do what's right, period. And that's why you're here. That's why we're pleased to have you here. That's why Senator Perkins and I will carry this bill for as long as we need to. And if we have objections to folks, tell them we can talk, we can modify, we can rewrite a little here and there. But the practice must be condemned in a state that professes to be a democracy. Thank you.
Thank you to both Senator Perkins and Assemblymember Aubury. Heard a lot about what solitary is. I was just wondering about how is it that people get into solitary. And I was wondering if you could share with folks some of the reasons why people end up in solitary.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Scott. You know, it's sad because when we think about solitary confinement in New York and you listen to popular media and what's going on, you think that it holds the worst of the worst, right? That this is some type of holding for people who are the Hannibal Lecters of the world, and if we don't cage them, that they're going to just jump up and bite your face off. But the sad fact is that's not true. The system itself is the worst of the worst. So the New York Civil Liberty Union had actually did an in-depth report called the Boxed-In Report, and what they showed was that 5 out of 6 people, not even half, Scott, 5 out of 6, like not even 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 out of 6 were for non-violent rule infractions. And what do I mean by rule infractions? I'm talking about things as simple as not picking up your pen and your fork in the mess hall, having a pack of sugar in your pocket, having too many T-shirts, or in the case where I was sentenced to solitary because I had pencils, postage stamps, T-shirts.
Thank you, Fi. I also wanted to turn now to Ms. Willis. And, we've talked about solitary as torture, but I wanted to have you explain a little from your son's perspective about what is the impact of solitary, and tell people, in his words, that we can bring Nicholas, who's currently in solitary, into this room.
I'm going to talk about torture in the box. My son, the shoe is intended to be a mental torture. It is designed to break you. This is my son's letter. There is no constant noise, arguing and yelling. There are no rehabilitation processes at all. Like they're not teaching them anything. They're just wasting their time in the box. What is the sense of being here? There's no purpose other than a painful idleness and mental anguish. Where is the rehabilitation? I have been in solitary confinement nearly 11 years. It's more than that. The box is starting to get to me. I suffer from anxiety very often. I will all of a sudden start having fast-paced breathing, and I cannot stop it. I have begun to suffer high blood pressure after being in the box. I also suffer from hallucination sometimes. I think people are calling me by my name, or I think I see people walking by, but there is no one there. Last week I heard a train going by, and no one else heard it. It makes you so crazy. The box plays tricks on your mind. I also suffer from outbursts. I will make a big deal out of something that is not a big deal. Getting angry over some minor, trivial things. Some goes definitely nuts in here. This box is a major impact on my family too. I haven't been able to hug my mom for 10 years, and that is true. My biggest fear is that I will get a letter someday saying that my mom has passed away, which I'm 76 years old. I have to see my fiance and my fiance's daughter through a gate. This is the only way that the little girl knows me. Yesterday was my birthday. was really hard to spend my birthday in this box alone, without any of my family or any human being to do nothing on my birthday. But sit in my cell and think about the facts that I have lost 10 years of my life in this box. It's hard to bear. And as if the isolation of the box itself wasn't enough, the relationship with correctional officers are terrible. There is constant mental torture. Correction officers know how to play mental torture, harassment, abuse, and threats. For example, it is a real problem that is the CO, hands on your food. There is always a constant fear that any day the correctional officer could slip something in your food. And they will do stupid stuff to play on your fears. They will say, like, enjoy your food, in a way that makes you think that they did something to it. And even if they didn't actually do anything, it messes with you. Or a CO would put coloring in your water to make it look like urine, and then make comments like, sorry, I couldn't hold it. Unfortunately, it's not just me who suffers abuse. It's not just the box. There are always guys coming into the box after they was assaulted by staff. Something has got to change. These guys took 10 years of my life. No one else should have to endure this torture in the box. Now, this is a book my son had written about solitary confinement and about why he's in prison. I don't know, I was not there, but from what I read and what people tell me, he was framed by district attorneys. You know, when people want positions, they do anything to make themselves look big. But the people that has put him in prison, a lot of them has been fired from their jobs. So I see that, you know, things are working out, but they're not working out fast enough. So we are selling this book if anyone is interested in knowing what's going on in the prisons or what happened to my son. So it wouldn't happen to your family. I've never been in prison. I've never been fingerprinted. And I now have 7 kids, but I never had anything like this in my life happen. But society is changing. And we cannot let our children go out there by themselves anymore. If they're not being shot down, they are put in jail. And it costs, for each prisoner, $50,000 a year. So, like the young man said, our taxes is paying for this. And our children are suffering. If they can give them, sometimes my son, he goes into the hospital for mental treatment. He is a very, not because he's my son, he is God's child, but he is a very intelligent young man. He has taught people before he went to prison how to use computers, and they got their own businesses. Even in prison, you should see the letters he writes. I mean, his mind is not there, but he writes all the time, so his mind won't really go. So I'm just telling you people, not just for me, but for society. We have to stop this thing. This thing is worse than a plague for the people to be in constant solitary confinement like that. Once or twice a week they take a bath. Imagine all them people. Imagine all them people taking a bath once or twice a week. And the soap is like this. I mean, it's not fair. The food, when you go to visit them, the money you have to spend. And the bus drivers that take you up there to see your children. Of course, every time you go, they raise the price. We pay $60 round trip. Then you have to buy the food from the machine. Sandwiches cost $3. And sometimes the machine takes your money, so you don't get your food. Half a chicken costs $6. It's not fair. It's not fair to the blacks. It's not fair to the Puerto Ricans. It's not fair to the whites. It's not fair to society. The CEOs, they living high off the hog. And I'm not prejudiced, but there's no black CEOs there. When they put them up in Albany and all them other places, you don't see no black folks. You only see white CEOs. So imagine what these people are going through.
Thank you, Ms. Willis.
Okay.
Just jump right in. Thank you so much. We started a little bit late and we're running a little bit short on time. And I want to make sure there's a little time for some questions from the audience. But so what I'd like is to hear once more first from Dakeem and from Five. And so first I'd like you to, if there's anything you didn't get to say that you want to say, I think go for it. And then secondly, Dakeem, can you just share with people about why you're a part of Cake and Jack and what it means to you to be a part of that. But first, if there's something else you wanted to make sure to say that you didn't get a chance to say yet.
Well, I would say that I'm a part of Cake, which is the campaign against isolated confinement, and Jack, which is the Jail Action Coalition, and I founded the Negation, which is organized to negate or abolish or repeal the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which effectively puts into place or kept in place slavery. And to me, it would seem from everything that I encountered, and the reason why it so affected me was because at the age of 16, I found myself in being held as a prisoner, and I wanted to understand the circumstances of my imprisonment. And so I began to study the laws of the land, which included the Constitution of the United States. And when I came upon the 13th Amendment, I discovered that the chief caveat of this particular clause is that anyone who is convicted of a crime is a slave of the state. And when I discovered and found this, it affected me, and I stopped right there in my analysis of what the case meant to me, and I began to look at what this issue meant and what it meant in terms of my confinement as a child and others similarly situated. And I began from that point to seek to understand what it meant and how it applied to me. And if you think about it, the only reason why systems of torture continue is to maintain the obedience of a slave population. Let me explain something to you. Today, in the 21st century, there are more slaves in the United States than after the Civil War. Okay, there are 4 times as many slaves in this country. The production level in which prisoners actually produce for the state is such that prisoners produce military parts. They produce vehicles. They produce bombs. The entire state public school system is supplied through prison slave labor. And so labor, production, obedience, and if you look at the major rules in the prison, the major rule in the prison is to obey all direct orders immediately without question. And this is to inculcate the slave mentality in individuals. And having seen that and compared it and actually rebelled against it because I knew that it was there to abuse me and that everything that was in place I began to understand. And so while I was in solitary confinement, I actually wrote the Catechism of a 21st Century Abolitionist. In the Catechism, what I did was I divided the personalities of a person who was opposed to slavery, is opposed to slavery. And those personalities looked at it in basically a 10 question answer analysis in which it draws the ultimate conclusion that the chief institution of repression in the United States is and remains slavery.
Thank you, Dakeem. Five, I was just wondering if there's any last things you wanted to say before we open up to questions, but also if you can make sure to let people know how can they get involved in this work, this movement, to end the torture of solitary and mass incarceration.
I just wanted to say that number one, solitary confinement is a direct reflection of mass incarceration. So if you're doing any work on criminal justice, parole reform, anything involved with criminal justice and mass incarceration is connected, because it is literally the same process just repeated inside a prison, right? We just remove people, put them in prison, and then just remove them from there and put them in a dungeon-like state. The other thing that I wanted to say, rather than anything else, is that there is a lot of change in New York State, but only small change. I'm going to say that. Big change needs to come, and overall change needs to come, complete change needs to come. There are two major coalitions, and what I mean coalitions is that if you have an organization, if you're a part of an organization, if you're an individual, if you're just a family member, anybody can join. So coalition means it's an open door process. Every meeting, we have meetings every month. We have meetings in different locations. We have meetings in different boroughs. We'll come to your house if you're cooking. I'll come to your house. I'm just telling you. So it's easy to get involved. We have one-step walkaways right now. Postcards you can sign if you wanted to sign them. We'll pay for them. You mail them, because you know we don't ask black people to pay for nothing. We got newsletters. We have information. We also do town halls, forums, and events in your neighborhood. If it's not in your neighborhood, find out why. But I just wanted to give everyone else a moment to say that each one of us are a person. Each one of us knows someone else. Let's start making this a comfortable conversation. Even if you go back to your home or go back to your school or go back to where you're coming from and create this conversation around how people are being isolated and tortured, it can be more of a comfortable conversation. And then go visit your assemblyman. How many people know who their assemblyman is? How many people know who their senator is? Their city councilman. Oh, this is awesome. We're going to end this week. So we also do legislative training. We also do training if you don't feel confident about it and you want to come in and learn more about what you need to talk about. You can come to us. We'll train you. We also set up legislative meetings to go speak with your legislator. I have legislative petitions right here. If you wanted to sign it, just put your address. We'll send it to your legislator for you. But I say this because there is every angle to get involved, because this is the human rights issue of today. People are torturing, people are dying, women are still being shackled in birth. Like literally, we just had an article that came out the other day about that. But I also want to say that there has been some changes. So yes, the New York City Believers Union did sue the Department of Corrections, and yes, it did isolate 16 and 17-year-olds from being in solitary, but we're hoping, and I say hoping because things always change, that they will reduce the age of isolated confinement to under 21 this year. And then also, they also ended up creating another unit, which is called the Enhanced Security Unit, on Rikers Island in city jails. And I'm a part of a coalition called Jails Action Coalition. It just focuses on the city jails. But CAKE itself focuses on everything, the state, so it affects the city as well. And they created this new unit, which is basically administration segregation. It is basically a unit where the administration has power to put who's in this unit and how they get out, and we're constantly fighting against that. But we cannot do that without public support. I know I'm talking too long, but also coming out to Board of Corrections meetings or coming to meetings and having your vote, or telling the mayor, telling the governor how you feel about this issue. And because, like Mama said, and like this young man that she quoted said it over here, Senator Perkins, I'd rather send my son to Columbia University for $42,000 a year than pay $50,000 for him to be in there, right? And we actually pay $167,000 per person on Rikers Island. So we have a lot of high costs in New York City, and we have a high cost in the state. But it's not affecting us, and today's prisoners is tomorrow's neighbors, so people come out upset, angry, emotionally disturbed, and psychologically damaged right back to the community.
Thank you, Five. I think Senator Perkins wanted...
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize. I have to run, and I want to thank you so much for the efforts y'all are making. You're making things happen. So don't despair that it's not happening. It is happening. Dick Durbin is on board on the national level. We think the federal government, my guy Obama, needs to be in the lead. On this, he made history becoming what he became. He can make history here as well and set a benchmark that every president thereafter will have to follow. Even if he embraces it and is not able to pass it, it will be something that will bring attention to it and will maybe inspire somebody to want to pick it up as well. So we got some work to do. I think we're on the right track. I want to thank again the opportunity for being here to participate, to get educated about it. I want a copy of the book. I'll buy a copy of the book. Okay. But so we want to make sure we hold that copy for us.
Who are you gonna buy?
Right place. Come on back.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. We're gonna open it up for a few questions from the audience. Though I did want to before we do that, I just wanted to add to what Five said about meeting with legislators. On April 22nd of this year, the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement is going to be coming here again to Albany for an advocacy day, and we'll be bringing buses up. And so if anybody from New York City wants to come, or anybody in Albany wants to come, we hope you'll join us. What we'll do is we'll go in teams and we'll go meet with 60 different legislators to tell them that we need to end this torture. And again, on May 5th, the Community Service Society is bringing another set of buses up to Albany, and HALT Solitary Confinement Act is also one of the bills they will be pushing for. So we hope that you'll join us and become involved. So let me open it up for questions. I see a lot.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry.
Yeah, one
I
last
just
thing.
wanted to say one thing. So there's also two other bills that are out there around legislation. Assemblymember Danny O'Donnell, who has a bill that's going to reduce the age of 21 to responsibility and actually placing people in solitary to 21, and mental illness and people with development problems, right? So when you talk about development, you're talking about mood orders and mental disorders that sometimes can look disturbing and be problematic. This is why people end up in solitary. But I also wanted to say that Assemblywoman Razik also has a bill on pregnant women, and we fully support any changes in isolation, but we need total change. And this bill is somewhat shooting for the stars, but when we're talking about human cost and human lives, we need to be aiming higher than that.
If people can just project, or if you want to come up and use the mic up here, because this mic doesn't seem to be working at the moment.
The batteries. It's going to
I
take a second. Give me that.
want to
I
ask
got it.
one question.
Yeah.
Is there any information that you might have about a brother by the name of Willie Bosket?
Yes.
And also wanted to commend Bill, he just ran for his leadership. But Willie Bosket was at Sullivan. Is he still there by chance?
Actually, sir, well, do you want to answer that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, he's still in isolation. Lily's still held. Lily's still in the same facility. His case was, and everybody who doesn't know, I just want to mention really quick, his case was what really started isolation in some sense. And the man that was sitting here, this great man that wrote, he's actually left today, Assemblyman Aubury, is the person who wrote the shoe exclusion law that literally banned people with mental illness from being in solitary. And it's a sad case that that young brother is still there, but it's just that he became the trademark for saying, dehumanizing people and saying this person needs to be confined.
And also, that case was the case that they used, was the face of the case they used to lower the age of criminal responsibility back in 1978. They used Willie Bosket in order to lower the age in which they imprison our children to 13 years old. So we have to reverse that, because it was a part of an entire process in which my case was also a part of that process to lower the age, because they was attacking children, and it actually culminated later on with the Central Park children case. And this is the attack, and it's another problem with the government of this country, which is a signatory to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. However, it has failed to put in place either the ratification or even the international standards for the enforcement. This is because they want to continue to imprison our children. And we have to be vigilant, and this is what we're saying, why our children are being placed in there, because it's easy to break a child and enslave them for life and make them a part of a continual process than it is for an adult.
Thank you, Duncan.
Simple question. This is an important topic, but there were only 2 senators that were in here. Are the rest of the senators involved in making sure that this bill gets passed?
We're trying to make sure your senators involved. A lot are, but I think Jack can handle the exact amount numbers.
Well, it's a great question. Right now, there are 21 total sponsors in the Assembly already, and 9 in the Senate. And so it's a good group of people, but we need to get them all on board. So we need to go legislator by legislator and tell them they need to end this torture. Thank you.
I just want to piggyback on that, sir, because you're absolutely right. Because no matter what district you live in New York State, you're going to have people directly affected by incarceration and isolation behind that. And people need to the constituents need to voice that they are paid officials.
And that's why I hope people will come with us on April 22nd or May 5th. I didn't mention it before, but on the petition that you may have signed that was going around, you can indicate if you're interested in coming on April 22nd or May 5th right on there. So if you haven't done that but you would like to come, please go back and put it next to your name. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing on this in this movement. But I want to say that there's so many who are not in solitary confinement and who are afraid to go in solitary confinement. So I think this brother right here really hit it right on the head. They're doing things to generate fear, you know, to a certain number. They're not gonna, we see it as a lot of money being spent. You know, we say like 100, why would they spend this money on this type of practice? But it's like an investment. So they'll spend so much money to the outside, to the public, they think it's a lot of money. It's really not. It's an investment to keep other people from wanting to go into solitary confinement. And those people will do what they want them to do. So it's like, you know, it is. It's a perpetual slave system, you know, and slavery was all about free labor. All right? So my nephew got locked up when he was 16. That was 26 years ago. He's still locked up.
Wow.
Thank you for your comment.
Good afternoon. My question is, what is the organization doing to communicate this to the community as far as using the radio stations that would reach out to a lot of the teenagers as well as young adults?
Yes, sir.
Newspapers, black newspapers, Hispanic newspapers, and print those particular assemblymen and senators that are presently in those positions, their names and what the bill is, so the public would be aware of what's going on, but mostly communication. And if you can get spots on the TV, which wouldn't be long, because by the time you blink, they're gone. So,
You're absolutely right.
You know.
I just wanted to say that we do an extensive amount of outreach. It's never enough outreach. We've done national broadcasts from WBAI to NPR to on the count. We do that on a weekly basis. We actually had just worked out something with 103.9 with D.L. Hughley, and we're going to be doing like a weekly update around solitary on that. But you're right, and there are more voices that we get out there, but one of the most powerful mediums I want to say is underused is social media, and just you and I sharing it within our networks. So even if you go onto our Facebook page or like our Twitter page and repost a fact or something about the storyline with someone in solitary, it's reaching a different crowd of people. Radio shows and, you know, I wish I was on TV, but we try to get into the news broadcasts as much as we can.
Yes, hello. My name is Dr. Glenn Vickers Bay. I'm a former prosecutor and also criminal defense attorney. Are you using the 1991 New York State's Commission on Minorities, which was a report 5 volume that concluded that New York State was running an apartheid-like system of justice? This report was the first executive branch judicial review, checks and balance review of the criminal justice system. It was authored by Governor Mario Cuomo. And for a legacy of the son, Andrew Cuomo, of linking together his father's really outstanding work. What a great legacy, but no one seems to know about it. When your enemy stipulates that they're discriminating against groups of people, suspending minority attorneys, suspended in the middle of a murder trial after cross-examining 8 detectives who committed perjury, or who basically said that they, like client after 13 hours of cross-examination, Sharon Thomas confessed to murder. And when I asked her, was it so, she said no. So I asked the detective, logical follow-up, well, did you, and there were 8 of them, and I asked all 8, did you get her to sign this confession? No. Did you take a video? No. Did you take an audio? No. Well, she said she didn't confess. You said she did. What did you do after she confessed to murder? We drove her home, they said. Now, I watch a lot of Law and Order. I've never seen them break a defendant and then drive her home after confessing to murder. So again, I'm trying to get assistance in this. She's still in prison. I'm still suspended. And Reverend Dr. Carl Washington, the moderator of the United Missionary Baptist Association, the biggest, most powerful black Baptist association, has written with Andrew Cuomo on this matter, the reparations. And
Thank you, sir. We're going to have to interrupt just because of the time. The next panel is about to come in.
I would like to give you my personal contact, and I would like to help with you other than this, but I don't want to rob from this event about another issue. I would love to talk to you about that another time to help you as much as I can, sir.
I think we'll take two more. Leave that woman there and then this woman up here in the front.
Hi, this is a comment. The gentleman said he wished that he could be on television. It's really easy to get programming on public access like Manhattan Neighborhood Network. So
that's a good shot. I was on 3 shows there. They shot me down for every project, every network in there, Manhattan Network, right across from John Jay.
So you can maybe consider collaborating with someone that already has a show, and maybe they'll allow you to have a segment or piece. There's a way.
I know, I tried, but I'm doing my own show. I'm doing a YouTube web series about solitary, and it's going to be dramatic and theatrical reenactments of it. But I'm also doing my own sort of talk show on YouTube for free for the networks. Because, Miss, I've tried this, I really have, and I've done work with major record labels. They done supported it, and the studios won't because of the content.
Good. Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Hold it close.
Sure. Yes, good afternoon. Right now, my heart is kind of pounding when I hear this story that you tell me. I said, oh my goodness, we have a senior person, the concerns of your children, and then our men being here. Some of our men are arrested. You know, in fact, today's Valentine's Day. Some of us are single. All these things kind of affect us. So in my heart, it's like pounding. I'm not kidding. It's like, my goodness, look at this. There's so many issues because there's a lot of people here. We have little specialties. And there may be other organizations that I'm presenting. But I will do as much as I can in terms of what you're doing. I applaud. My heart is like pounding of my goodness. How do they do this to our men, to our women? Why they do this? It's just not fair. And I just want to let you know that you're not by yourself, and the nerve for you to come here and express it and tell people, I applaud, especially you, ma'am. And my question is, do you have some information that I could go in the computer, but is there anything that you have to educate more people in our community or the other organizations that this is not justice? And I'm very hurt in terms of that.
Actually, Dakeem has actually published his own negation. It's right there, ma'am. You can pick up a copy. We also have flyers. There's Solitary Watch, which is a whole news network that retails it. But I wanted to expound on what you said. You're absolutely right, and people should understand that no one is excluded in isolation in New York State. Doesn't matter if you're a kid, if you're pregnant, you have no arms, no legs, quadriplegic, doesn't make a difference. Addicted to drugs, going down off a heroin overdose, it does not matter. They will put you in solitary confinement. They will isolate you.
And also, I made a video pamphlet of the catechism, so you don't even have to read it. You can go at Twitter at DakeemX. That's DAKEMX, or you can have one of these. There's no cost of it. We'll actually read it, so that people can actually understand the dynamic of what I call the prison slave industrial complex. And I think that that's what we have to try and understand about the entire system, what it's really about, what it's based upon, and why we shouldn't trade off. And this is what happened in New York City, why we shouldn't trade off one system of torture for another system of torture. That means let's not trade off isolated confinement, solitary confinement. They'll start screaming and banging at the top of their voice. This person completely changes. So a person has to either adapt or be destroyed by those conditions. And this is what I mean, is that when you're dealing with a condition like solitary confinement, it's just something that you have to learn to deal with, and otherwise it'll destroy you. And it is torture, because if you don't go into some type of protective, defensive mode, it's going to destroy you.
Thank you, Dakeem.
For instance, control units that basically torture people through things like enforced isolation or sensory deprivation.
Hakeem, I'm sorry to
other
interrupt.
forms of torture.
The next panel groups are here, so I want to just thank everybody so much for coming. And also to let you know that there are other panels even today about other issues related to criminal injustice. The same punishment paradigm and racism that's infusing solitary confinement is also affecting survivors of domestic violence. There's a panel right after this. There's about criminal justice reform over in the Legislative Office Building.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for allowing us to interrupt your proceedings. However, we had a sort of a special occasion that there was a gentleman who we wanted to honor who started out in Buffalo and then ended up in New York City. And in the meantime, between that, Imhotep Gary Bird has done such great work on the air for the people of our community. So we thought that it would be appropriate for him to come this weekend in the midst of Black History Month, in the midst of the Caucus Association Weekend, in the midst of electing the first African-American speaker to the New York State Assembly, to come and we would give him the award and some recognition for the tremendous work that he's done on the radio in the city of New York. And Senator Stuart Cousins has joined with me in that, and so we have documents to give you. I don't know that we want to read them. She may want to read them.
No, I'm not going to.
She doesn't want to read them. So we have citations and proclamations, but more than that, we wanted to give Imhotep an opportunity just to talk to us a bit about what it means to go from Buffalo to New York City. Neither place very warm.
Well, first of all, it means escaping a lot of snow. I think you all know that. I had a funny moment as we walked into the room. I know everybody here is experiencing this heat that's happening. I've always told this joke about Buffalo, New York, that whenever the winter came, that in Buffalo, when you were coming from outside, the one thing you could guarantee when you opened the door to your home was this wall of heat that would come from inside of your house. Now, it wasn't from just the basic heating, it was from the pots that my grandmother would put on the stove and turn up with water in them. Y'all know about that, to get that heat circulated. So you always had this amazing moment of walking in saying, because you know it was on the outside. So this was a Buffalo memory coming back to me. I am truly honored today for obvious reasons. It certainly is good to be above ground and good to be honored in the process for the work that you've done. But also it's a marker for me and for the broadcast, and that my roots, as you just heard, are in Buffalo, New York. And although most people at this point, I've been in New York City longer than I've been in Buffalo, or I was in Buffalo. And so it only dawned on me in the last couple of years that when I think about my history as a broadcaster, that it includes a much longer tenure than I tend to think. So what we're about to now celebrate, and this is the beginning of it with these presentations, is 50 years as a licensed broadcaster in the state of New York. And let me say that I'm very pleased that Hank Cameron, an educator from School 37, Buffalo, New York, and also a broadcaster, started me out so young, because that's a long time. I was 14 years old when Mr. Cameron discovered me in a community center in Buffalo on Lemon Street called the Neighborhood House. The Neighborhood House was so close to where I lived that if you hit a stopwatch, I would be there before the stopwatch hit 1 minute. That's how close it was. And it was in that neighborhood house, which as a kid, I had no idea where that came from. We looked up and suddenly there was a neighborhood house and a place for us to go, a place we could play basketball, a place that we could be in plays. I was discovered in a play in the neighborhood house by an educator who taught at a school down the block, and ultimately said to me, after I thought I messed up because I was talking to a young lady while the play was going on, and my part came up, and because I'd been trained by General Bass, a famous educator from Buffalo, New York, who trained me as a public speaker, and so I knew how to, quote, throw my voice. So I kind of threw my voice out, and the broadcaster, Mr. Cameron, looked at me very sharply. And he said after the play was done, they were recording it for WUFO, our first black radio station. And he said, you have to stay. I need to talk to you. And he said to me at age 14 years old, have you ever thought of going into broadcasting? And I was interested in being an actor, being a social commentary comedian like Dick Gregory. I wanted to do that kind of thing. And as it turns out, that began the genesis of my career and becoming a broadcaster by the age of 15, 16 years old on WUFO. And so that tenure, of course, set the trajectory for literally everything that I do in my life today. And I can look back now, and it's, I think, very important to be here to say this. I can look back now and really know that the neighborhood house is really the place that was responsible for me being able to be where I am and subsequently who I am today in my career. Hank Cameron, as an educator, coming into the community from the local radio station, taking an interest in a young kid at 14 years old and telling me, if you're willing to get up at 4 o'clock every morning for an entire summer, I will train you to be a broadcaster. I was on the porch at 3 a.m. waiting every day. And hence, it all began from there. And later in New York City, Mr. Jerry Bolding took a chance on a young kid, 19 years old, and brought me to New York City as the youngest broadcaster in the history of New York City. And that is what it is. So this marker of what's happening today means a lot to me. My grandmother, Lori Bird, who raised me along with my mother, gave me at age 9 and 10 years old a Polaroid land camera, which some of y'all remember was a lot heavier than the cameras that y'all working with today. And I was a kid, so I had to try to hold this thing, which I didn't ask for. She gave me that. She gave me 2 tape recorders. I didn't ask for the tape recorders. She gave me a record player and an 8-inch portable TV because she wanted me to stop interrupting her stories to look at Channel 17. She said, I'm gonna get you a little TV. So she went to a pawn shop next door, found a little TV and got me the pawn shop. So my room, before I ever entered broadcasting, looked like a broadcast studio, literally. And because of Mr. Cameron's concern, and because of the ability that General Bass had to inspire young people like myself to stand up in front of people and speak. And they say even today, speaking is perhaps the most difficult thing for anyone to do. That's adults, much less children. And so the idea of standing in front of audiences and all that at that time and being trained was something I got from Buffalo, New York. So between my grandmother, between Hank Cameron, between General Bass, it was that foundation that really essentially is what I took into New York City, and really this award coming as it does from the state, I think is something that with all the presentations and awards that I received over the years, and I've been blessed to receive many, it means so much to me because I realized in the last 2 years, I'm not just a broadcaster in New York City, I'm a broadcaster with a history in the great New York State. So it's exciting for me to be here, and I'm honored certainly to receive the award and look forward perhaps in the future of being able to consolidate what we do in New York City to bring the cities and the state of Buffalo together in Buffalo and New York City, Albany and so forth, together in a way where we're operating in a single accord and able to consolidate our power in more important ways. That politic I learned from the former Deputy Speaker, Mr. Arthur Eve, who gave me that training that all of what I was doing in New York City was fine, but he said it won't mean anything if you don't understand what's going on up in Albany. I do, and because I do, I certainly cherish and accept with graciousness this wonderful moment. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Hotep. I'm Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins. I'm the minority leader of the state Senate. And I want you to know, and all of you do know, that because there are 2 houses, nothing is really ever complete unless both houses bless the activity. So my wonderful counterpart, Mr. Aubury in the Assembly, has given a resolution for Hotep. And of course, our chair of our conference weekend, Crystal Peoples-Stokes is here. She's an assembly woman. I know she's the one that makes this all happen. And, you know, giving us an opportunity before we hear from our wonderful mayors, an opportunity to congratulate this trio, this voice of the African-American diaspora. But we know the power of what he does on the GPE really, okay, you always said, just reverberates throughout the state. So it is my pleasure to, again, join with the Assembly in congratulating you, Hotep, thanking you. I told him when I thought I knew him because you hear his voice all the time. You think he's like a distant friend. And he's that approachable. So he is. Continue, my brother, to tell our story so well. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.